Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Big thank you to our sponsor, Celebrity Coaches, providing transportation to the biggest names in entertainment. Thanks to Celebrity, we're hitting the road to talk to the pros that make concerts and live events happen. Today, we're on the streets of Nashville, Tennessee. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please leave us a comment. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe. On today's episode, our guest is a seasoned touring guitar tech with many other skills. Besides being a musician himself, over the years he has toured working at several different positions. Stage manager, lighting director, assistant tour manager, merchandise rep, power technician, drum tech, bass tech, guitar tech. Just a few of the acts that he has worked with are the band Red, Pat Benatar, Walk Off the Earth, Lifehouse, Sick Puppies, Faith No More, Parmalee, and more. Currently, and for the last 5 years, he has been on tour with the multi-platinum country superstar Dustin Lynch. This guy has also created a huge online presence as a content creator and in several other avenues. He's got a very popular reaction video YouTube channel. He is active on multiple socials. He's a gamer and a live streamer. On top of all that, he has just recently become a proud dad to a new baby daughter. Originally from the great state of Illinois, he is Ian, better known as Tank the Tech. Thank you for your time today, Tank.
Dude, thank you, man. This is awesome. I'm excited about this.
Thanks. Thanks for doing this. We met a couple years ago on the Chris Young tour, country tour. And, I talk about this with some other guests too, is like, you form a bond with the people you're traveling with. And even though we're working with different acts, you're traveling next to each other, you eat next to each other, you do ungodly hours next to each other and stuff like that. So you develop a little friendship, relationship, bond, and that sort of thing. And then it's like tour's over and you're gone and you don't get to see each other. And I haven't seen you in months. And it wouldn't be just because of the pandemic, it's because you'd be on the other side of the country.
Yeah, I think since we toured together a few years ago, I think we've run into each other 2 or 3 times at festivals or something like that. And that's the great thing about that, though, is when you form those friendships on tour, I can go a year without seeing somebody, and the second I see them at a festival, I'm like, oh, what's up, man? It's great. I
was already on that tour with Cassidy Pope and Chris Young. And you guys came in the middle of the year, and we were out there together for a few months. And, of course, there's a new bunch of people that showed up, don't know everybody, and everybody's doing their thing. I'm running around doing my thing. And so I always say that, everybody's workspace kind of is telling. And, whether you're a monitor engineer or a tech or the lighting guys in dimmer world or whatever, everybody's got their space. And so right away I noticed your space. Your workspace has got a vibe. It's got a definite vibe to it, and clean and professional. And and sometimes you're in tight quarters. And so when you have to walk by, sometimes you have to walk through somebody's workspace. And it was always cool because there could be chaos going on and kind of walk into your little space and it's like, and then all of a sudden you pass that, it's like, chaos again. And so it shows your professionalism, your attention to detail in your workspace, and so I appreciated that. And also, what was cool was we were on a country tour, but and a lot of great musicians out there. But every once in a while, I hear some serious metal riffing going on in the background. I was like, is that Testament? What is? Who's playing that? Because none of your guys.
No.
And so I come around the corner there. You are playing through a little bitty amp or something like that. Really, really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
But anyhow, you also work with a very good buddy by Mitchell Curtis.
Oh, yeah.
Love that guy.
Yep.
And the other thing, too, is that knowing you a little bit and learning some things about you recently as getting ready for today, you have worked your way up, worked your ass off to get to where you are and to work for the kind of acts that you work for and the position you're in. And you have also... You're a great example of how to get through this time period, this pandemic, which has challenged everybody. So I really appreciate your tenacity and your endurance and your, perseverance.
Yeah, I appreciate
through
that,
all that, because your story, everybody's got a story, and you scrapped to get on the road to find your way here, from musician to tech and everything else. And And so, glad to have you as a, basically a veteran in this business. No, thanks for coming and doing this.
I appreciate it, man. In a weird way, like, it kind of feels like an honor to do something like this because, as I'm sure you're aware, like, even though the crew guys are a big part of what's going on, we don't necessarily get to do stuff like this a lot.
Exactly.
So it feels very cool to be doing something like this, man. I was really excited. To this.
Well, I want to make sure and acknowledge a lot of the guys that are doing the hard work behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know about in those moments and things like that. A lot of people think those artists show up and all that stuff is already there.
Yeah.
And but anyhow, so let's talk about the most recent work. You got to do some work. Not everybody's gotten to do real work. You just did a streaming thing with Dustin?
Yeah. We did a streaming event for John Deere. God, I can't remember what it was called. I think it was called Save the Farm. It was they were raising money for charity for farmers and stuff like that, but it was wild because it was the first time we had done anything in months, and it was full band.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first time. So since this pandemic started, we got sent home in early March. And I think since then we've done 2 or 3 things, if that. We did like an iHeartRadio thing, but we got to go into the Brooklyn Bowl, which was supposed to open in March.
Right.
And we got to see that venue for the first time. And it was great, man. It was great to sit and work again, but it was so odd at the same time because a big part, even for the crew guys, like obviously people know that the crowd is a big part of the band having fun and stuff like that. It's the same for the crew, man. If I look out and see the crowd having fun, I have fun working. Okay. And to do a show like that was live with nobody standing in the audience, no crowd noise, no nothing. It was weird, but it was great to work and to see everybody. And we did a full day of rehearsals before that.
Yeah.
And
that's a good healthy dose of getting back to work.
But at the same time, when we finished, it's like I mean, you know how it is when we go on the road. It's like you pack everything up, you do it again the next day. Like it just keeps going. Yeah. And this was like, all right, we're gonna take everything back to storage, and we'll let you guys know when we got something coming up again. And it's like it's not the artist or the management's fault or anything like that. It's what's with everything going on. We don't know when the next actual time we're gonna work is.
So I was gonna ask you about the Brooklyn Bowl because that's a new venue here in Nashville. It looks really nice, and I've been to other locations. That's gonna be a cool venue for this city.
Yeah, I've been saying for years now that Nashville has needed a good mid-sized venue because a lot of the shows that I've seen in town are like exit in like 500 capacity. Right. Marathon's pretty good. I mean, I like seeing shows there. I've gone to a bunch. We've done shows there. But this venue is set up like a proper club venue. Yeah. There's a big open floor. There's a great balcony around it. That's the mid-tier venue this town has needed for a while because once you go past, Marathon and Exit In and stuff like that, it's like the next thing you've got is the amphitheater and the arena. Right. So I think it's going to be a really good venue to bring in a lot of acts that may not have stopped here before, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah.
So I also noticed you guys, the guitars are fractals. Is everything on fractals now?
Yeah, we're all digital now, man.
Very cool. And how long have you been doing that? Were you doing that before the pandemic?
For about 2 months. It was funny, man, because over the last few years, I've slowly started seeing everybody on the road transition from tube amps to digital, whether it's Kemper, Helix, Fractal. Yeah. And I kind of had this old school mentality where I was like tube heads for life. I realize now what that really was the fear of learning something new. I was just being stubborn because when management told us they wanted us to go digital with all Dustin's stuff and they asked us what we wanted to do, I just straight up said, I'm like, I don't want to do it. Because I had this weird notion that it would take away from the live feel of the show. And I was totally wrong. Yeah. Because we switched, they let us try out a few things, and we switched to the Fractal Axe-FX 3. And the technology in the digital amps now are so good that the tones are indistinguishable. Yeah. Like, I could not tell you the difference if I heard a recorded, it's just amazing, man. The second we started working with them and I finally took the time to learn the system and learn everything I could do, unbelievable. Yeah. And then on top of that, we also programmed our pedal board changes into our track system.
Wow.
So, for anybody that's not familiar with that, obviously but MIDI time code and that kind of stuff, you could time code lights, some bands do pyro shots, stuff like that. So when we were still running tube amps, there were times where Chris, one of the guitar players that I tech for with Dustin, he would be on the other side of the stage, like on a riser, highlighted for a solo, but needed to change effects. So I'd have to go out on stage and hit his pedal board for him. Right. Now, automatic switch.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. And I've had no problems with them whatsoever. And the way we run our rigs is we have two of them. And I have an A-B switcher, so if our main one fails, I can just switch it really quick. I've never had a problem with them.
Yeah.
And then it still blows my mind thinking about it. And then setup time too. The first time we used them on a show, we had done like a week of rehearsals in town with them, and then we went to Crash My Playa, Luke Bryan's festival in Cancun.
Okay.
And we flew with them, and my setup time was like 10 minutes.
Oh, man.
Like we were ready for line check in like 10 minutes, and normally when we're getting rented backline and stuff, I have to find everything. I have to make sure it's working in good order. Then I have to cable everything. Yeah. They fly racked and patched together. I literally just had to stack them and plug them in. That was
the fact that you can travel with those things so easily makes a huge difference.
And we got the racks that we got built were from Circle 3 Designs case company that I've sworn by for years. He has a deal with Pelican, so the racks that we got for them that we use on the road, rolling racks, but they have removable racks, and then all I have to do for a fly date is just pull that rack out, throw it in the Pelican it came with that's padded out custom for it, and that's it. That's literally it.
Man, that's very cool.
Yeah.
And so is there a backup? Like you've got an A/B system, so there's a backup, but is there any, like when you're traveling with your own trucks and things like that, is there any amps? Is there any real amp sitting in the truck just in case?
Not anymore. Nope. Yeah, we went from having, on Chris's rig, we were using some Morgan amps, and I think I had a Fender Bassman in there with like a Marshall 412 and another Morgan. And the second we got the Fractals, all that went back to his house.
Man.
Like no amps, no nothing. Everything's pumped right into the in-ears. When we did our rehearsal for the Brooklyn Bowl a couple of weeks ago, it was so funny that you pull out your ears and it's literally just the drum kit.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, we used to get, I used to get like the full force of the complaints, but we had loud amp rigs, like stupid loud amp rigs.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember one of the last tours we were on, I'd get like people from other camps, and I'm like, in the middle of our show, they'd be like, dude, can you turn down your amp? And I'm like, are you kidding me? We're in the middle of a show, but I get it. Yeah. They were insanely loud.
They were pointed off stage.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
so
I remember.
But now, now that we're digital, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like it's so quiet and so great. And it's actually made working on guitars easier, because when you have that much noise in your guitar world,
tuning, man,
it'll throw off the tuning, especially with acoustics. Now that it's dead quiet, dude, it's been a breeze.
It's such a nice thing, especially to mix out front with that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's go back and let's just talk a little bit about how you entered the pandemic world, January, February, and then what you were headed into, what you were planning on, and then how everybody reacted.
So our last show, and this is still kind of like eerie to think about. Our last show was in Las Vegas. It was March 11th or 12th, one of the two. And the COVID stuff was kind of in the news at the time in the States. It was starting to ramp up.
Yeah.
And I remember in the morning during the show, there was no signs that anything was wrong.
Right.
Like everybody's working as normal, stuff like that. And then we were supposed to leave for Australia like 2 days later. And management was at this show that we did, and them and Dustin rounded everybody up and just said, hey, just so you guys know, we made the decision, just in case, we're not going to go to Australia. And we're like, I think a lot of us were relieved, because we were like, okay.
Yeah.
So then we did the show. Nothing out of the ordinary during the show. The show was fine. Everything was great. It was fun. And then the second the show ended, they kind of rounded us all up again, and they're like, hey, we're all going home. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah, they're people are getting worried. Like, promoters are going to start canceling shows and stuff like that, so people are going home. And I was like, okay. And at the time, we didn't know what was going on, so they're like, we're just planning on a couple weeks. I was like, all right, great.
Right.
I remember that night after we loaded everything out and we went back to our hotel rooms to go shower before we went back to the bus. They had employees of the casino hotel stationed at the elevators with disinfectant spray and wipes and stuff, that every time somebody touched an elevator thing, they're wiping it down. And that was the first time that I really was like, wow, like something's going on here. And then they gave us the option of flying home or busing home, and I was like, yeah, I'll play it safe and take the bus. So we rode back from Vegas to Nashville, and by the time we got back to Nashville, everything started shutting down. I mean, it was like, I remember the first 2 weeks we were home. It's a little different feeling than we have now. I think 9 months into this, everybody, I won't say people have gotten comfortable, but they've adapted and they've gotten used to what's going on. The first couple weeks of living in that state where they had announced an official worldwide pandemic and stuff, like, there was a sense of paranoia.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'd go to the store and I know I'd come home right away, and like my wife and I are like Lysoling all the door handles and stuff like that, and like cleaning the groceries when we're getting them out of the bags. And now like a lot of that's gone away, but at the same time it was like, we sat at home for a couple weeks, and because of our schedules, I was kind of pumped about it at first. I was like, all right, 2 free weeks off at home, cool. And then it turned into a month, and then it turned into, I know around June maybe, we had a show that they're like, we are doing this show, we're going to South Dakota, we're going to do this show, the cases down there are like almost nothing, or up there rather. And then like 3 days before the show, they're like, promoter canceled it. And then I think that's the moment where I started realizing, like,
this isn't gonna
we
happen.
are not going back to work for a long time. And shortly after that, like, I got that sense of, what am I going to do to provide for myself and my family? Because, we won't get into specifics, but there's certain ways that tours work in terms of how crew guys get paid. Some tours pay by show, some pay by week, salary. And, working for Dustin, I've been very fortunate with how he takes care of us. But in this situation, what people got to remember, too, is that the artists aren't making money either.
Right.
And you can't pay 20 people that work for you when you're not making any money.
Right.
And, fortunately, Dustin took care of us very well. And for as long as he was able to. And now I think the whole industry is kind of in that same boat where it's like, we're finding other means to provide and make money and stuff like that, which I've been fortunate that, I've fallen into something. It's also been really unfortunate for the bands that were just starting to hit their stride as bands, man. Absolutely. There are so many acts that like have started blowing up over the last couple of years. Like, for example, we were talking about Ginger, metal band from the Ukraine. Dude, this last couple of years for them, momentum has been massive. And this year, they started their first ever headlining tour, got 12 shows in, and then this happened. And it's like, we were talking about the same in the country world with some of these artists that have gotten singles on the charts and that are just now starting to get to a point where, they're growing. But then by the time, I mean, we're almost at a year of this.
Absolutely.
And all that momentum that they had in touring and releasing things is going to be, you kind of lose a step, which is really unfortunate.
Right. And then as they have done and as Dustin has done and many doing the streaming thing. But once you do a couple of those, then what?
I mean, it's cool. It's, to me, the live stream that we've seen online, and I've watched a bunch of them. I actually watched one the other night that was one of the most creative, funny, entertaining things I've seen from any band in this pandemic so far. But that kind of stuff, from my perspective, is more for the fans at home that haven't been able to see live music, because bands are not making a ton of money from that.
No, they're not.
Like,
it costs money most of the time.
And I think that's a big misconception in the industry, is a lot of people see these bands and think that they're larger than life and they make tons and tons of money. And
well, they think that any artist is a millionaire. And they don't understand that they have a lot of employees under them.
And it's the live stream I watched the other night. It's, they've been around for like 20. It was Every Time I Die, like hardcore metal band from Buffalo.
Yeah.
Super white collar or super blue collar band. They've been van and trailer touring for 20 years. Yeah. Like they're just grinding at it. And if they played in Nashville, I think the last time I saw them in Nashville was at the End.
Oh,
like 300 capacity. Like,
yeah.
But other people see bands like that and they're like, oh, those guys have it made and they're loaded. No, those guys
they're struggling, man.
Yeah.
They're fighting to get to the next city.
Yeah.
Even as many fans as they have and things like that. The music business in general before the pandemic, it's tough to sell your music.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You were talking about misconceptions. You're pretty much sober.
Mm-hmm.
No nothing.
Nope.
No alcohol, no drugs, no nothing. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is like this is real work.
Yeah.
And it's not all fun and games, and it's not a party all the time.
Yeah.
So
it took years for even some of my family members to realize what I was doing was like actual work.
Yeah.
Like I think so this is about 14 years of me as like being on the road, roadie, crew guy.
Yeah.
And I think probably the first 5 or 6 years of that, honestly, I was just like making ends meet. I was paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Like I had to get to that point. And I think it was about the time that my wife and I bought our first house. People were like, oh, so like you make money doing this. Like to some of my family members, they thought it was the same as when I was in a local band in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this is a career. This is a job.
It's not just a hobby.
And in terms of like that party lifestyle, don't get me wrong. Like I'm not going to lie. Like there's partying going on the road. I've done my fair share of it in the past, but there's a job that needs to be done first. And a lot of that partying after the show with crew guys and stuff like that. And when I say partying, most of the time it's 10 guys and girls on a bus unwinding, having beers after working all day. Like it's not like people see movies like Rockstar and stuff and they're like, oh, there must be like women and booze and drugs everywhere. I'm like, no, not really. And honestly, one of the reasons I stopped was because of the country industry. Like, I've worked for some bands that I'm not gonna lie, like backstage, like when I got on those tours, I was like, how do these people do this every night and function the next day?
Exactly.
And when I got into, and that was more rock and stuff like that. And then when I got into country, it was like a whole nother level of, I wouldn't say partying, but like consumption. Like people in the country world can drink and they're proud of it.
Yeah.
So when I got into the country world, I definitely noticed, looking back on it now, I noticed that my tendencies of drinking started ramping up and stuff like that. And, you know, fortunately, I never did anything. Well, I was going to say stupid, but I've definitely done stupid things. But I've never done anything that would endanger or hurt other people. Like, yes, I've been a drunken idiot on tour, but it got to a point where I started seeing it as, it was like, it was bad. Yeah. Like I had warning signs there that I realized that like I may have an alcohol issue, and I stopped. Yeah. And then a couple years after that, so I haven't drank in almost 4 years now.
Great.
And then semi recently, within this past year, I decided to cut out everything. Like anything that can affect me from the neck up, like I just don't take. And the funny thing about that is I did our last show that we did this year, I tore my labrum in the shoulder.
Oh, man.
So when we got home, I had to have surgery. But because of the pandemic, I had to wait 2 months to have the surgery. And when I had the surgery, I remember talking to my doctor, and I was like, I don't want pain meds. Like, I don't want opioid, narcotic pain meds. And he's like, are you sure? Yeah. And I was like, he's like, it's going to be bad. And I proudly, like, I've made it through that recovery without taking any of it. And the last thing about that too is one thing that I've been proud of too is especially being sober as a tech on the road is that I know that at all times the people I'm working for can 100% trust that I'll be fine because I'm sober. Yeah. That if they ever need anything, I'm always fine. Like, and again, that's not a knock on anybody else. No. It's just they've seen me at my worst of drinking on the road, so they now know that I'm at that point where it's like fully reliable.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know yourself, and if you're not dependable, you won't keep your job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you have to be. Well, let's talk about how you got here and the kind of jobs that you're doing and things like that. So let's go back to Chicago and your family and how you got into music.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in a household that was very music. Like, music was everything.
Okay.
There was always music on, stuff like that. And my dad played guitar and harmonica and a bunch of other stuff, but he was never in bands or anything. But as I started growing up, I really got into different instruments. And when I was younger, I played saxophone from the time I was like 9 years old.
Right.
Tried to play piano, and I was terrible at it, so I stopped. And then when I was 12 or 13, somewhere in middle school, that's about the time where, like, all the kids in school were, like, forming bands.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I want to be in a band. Like, people think I'm cool.
Yeah.
And I remember I traded a paintball gun that I had because I grew up in a very small farm town outside of Chicago. Lots of woods, lots of cornfields. Okay. And we used to go paintballing. I traded a paintball gun to one of my friends for he had a Squier P bass, and that was my first bass that I learned on. And, you know, my dad was super supportive all the time, and, you know, he really gave me that push to keep going. So by the time I was 17, I joined what I would say is like my first real band that actually did real legitimate shows. Yeah. And it was funny because I was 17 years old, and everybody that was in the band was like 30. And it was wild, man. It was really weird. But, you know, when I joined that band, my dad, you know, he got me an upgrade. I think my second bass after that was a Fernandez Gravity 4, which I don't even think they make anymore. But, and then super long story short, I joined a different band after that.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I think I realized, like, I might be able to make something of this. Like, it was an established band in Chicago that was looking for a new bass player. And,
More your age.
Yeah. I think at the time I was probably 19 or 20, and they were all like late 20s. And, you know, they were playing shows at House of Blues, Double Door, Metro, like legendary venues in Chicago. So when I auditioned for them, my dad was like, all right, now that you're actually trying to make a go at this before your audition, let's upgrade your gear. And I mean, I went from having like, you know, a $250 bass and a small little bass rig to my dad really supported me with all that, man. That's awesome. One shot at a Guitar Center, he had to have spent $3 or $4 grand on new gear for me. Man. And that's when I really started taking pride in the fact that I have really nice gear and I'm going to take myself seriously. So I was in that band for a while, and while I was in that band, I went to college. And I went to college to play baseball. I went to Aurora University right outside Chicago.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
So in high school, were you participating in high school band at all, or were you?
Yeah.
You already playing instrument? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you do marching band and that sort of thing? Okay. Is that when you played sax?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And in fact, I also played. I played football and baseball through all of high school.
Okay.
And during halftime of our football games, I'd have to run inside, grab my saxophone, and then run back outside to meet the band, and would have to do marching band in my football pads. Like,
yeah, I've seen that happen before, and so obviously you must have been a gifted athlete or something if you went into, well, you went to Aurora University for majoring in athletics and baseball.
So I went because I wanted to play baseball.
I see.
That's what I wanted to do.
Okay. But
I was majoring in secondary education and biology, which was to be a high school level science teacher.
Okay.
At the time of my life when I did that, I wanted to get that degree and then become a high school teacher so I could coach sports. That's really what I wanted to do.
I was going to ask you, if you weren't in this business, what would you have done? So you would have been doing something like that.
If I finished school, I left.
Yeah.
So my freshman year, I injured my arm, like to the point where like it still to this day hurts to throw.
In baseball?
Yeah.
Okay.
It hurts to throw still. And there's also a certain sense of, man, you could be really good in high school and then get to college and you're pretty good, but by the time you get to like that major league level, man, that's where you start realizing like the ungodly talent of some of these athletes. So you also have to be realistic about it. Yeah, I would have loved to have played pro baseball, but could I have? Probably not, but you never know. But injured myself.
Yeah, that takes... that.
And I kind of lost all interest in going to school after that for some reason. Like, I was like, I don't even care.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of college. I moved in with the band, a couple of the band members of the band I was in. And, yeah, I did that for, I think I ended up waiting at a restaurant that my keyboard player worked at, or was a manager at, or something like that.
Oh, waiting tables.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just, like, that's all I was doing. And then we got to a place with that band where it was just stagnant. We weren't getting any bigger. We weren't doing anything. And then one of the biggest local bands in Chicago had announced that they were looking for a bass player. And I went and auditioned, and I joined that band instead. And that the name of that band was INEPT.
Okay.
And I spent 2.5 years nonstop in a van and trailer with those guys.
It was steady work.
Oh, but steady work, but we made nothing. So these are the experiences that I now value in my life because I learned how to live off of like $3 a day. And I'm not even kidding. Like, there were times where I would have to borrow like $2 from one of my guitar players just to get like a burger at McDonald's. Yeah. Like, we were doing great shows. We were on awesome tours. We played big shows. We got signed. We had our album released in Japan, a bunch of this really cool stuff, but it got to a point where after 2.5 years of just being broke, like, it got at me. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, and we happened to be on tour with Red. And there happened to be a moment on a show we did where they had a very small crew at the time. And we did a show at a club somewhere where the house lighting director they had just was not doing a good job. And I remember their tour manager saying, I wish somebody on this tour knew how to run a lighting board. And I kind of was like, I do.
Yeah.
And he was like, how? Because when we were home from our tours, I worked at a venue outside of Chicago called Mojo. Small club, like 600 people.
Yeah. Is it still there?
They moved, but maybe it's not still there. So they've moved like 3 times.
Yeah.
I don't think it does exist still.
Okay.
Because they moved a couple times and they wound up in Joliet, and I think it turned into some other venue. But at the time, the only people working there was the owner of the club, ran sound, and me. Like, I was a one-man show. I would show up at, like, if there was like a 2 p.m. load-in, I'd show up at 11 in the morning, I'd clean the venue by myself, I'd load the bands in, I'd patch everything, I did everything, and it was a great learning experience.
Oh, absolutely. And so you were like the house tech for whatever.
Pretty much.
And for when a band showed up, you were the guy.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't do was sound, because the owner of the club, that was his thing, that's what he wanted to do. But there were bands that, like, if they didn't have a touring LD with them, they'd be like, you know, feel free if you want to just punch buttons and go for it. So I learned how to use our house console. So going back to that Red thing, I told their tour manager, I was like, yeah, I know how to use a house console. And he's like, seriously? I was like, yeah. He goes, and we knew their music really well because we'd been touring with them for like 6 months. Yeah. He's like, at our next show, you want to run lights for us and see how it goes? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I did it, and it was great, and it was fun. And then they were like, hey, if we paid you like, I don't know, like kicked you like $50 after your set, would you just literally just run the house consoles for a set? Dude, $50 a day was more than I had been making for years. And I was like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So super long story short after that, eventually a time came where one of the members of Red called me, because when we were on tour with them, I had kind of expressed how frustrated I was of being just broke in the band and stuff like that. And they offered me a job. And he said, we need a merch guy, but you were also really good doing our lighting on tour. Would you come work for us?
Yeah.
And I thought about it for maybe a couple days, because I was really like, I loved being in a band. I loved playing, but I was like, I don't think this is a sustainable career.
Yeah.
So I did it. And then the funny thing was, the first tour I did with him, I think, was in 2008 or 9.
Yeah.
But I was still living in Chicago. So every time we started a run, I would drive from Chicago to Nashville and because they all live here.
Yeah.
And I would just drive back and forth. Yeah. And I worked for them for a couple of years and started picking up other skills along the way.
Rewind just a second.
Yeah.
So when you were with INEPT,
yeah,
were y'all in vans or were you in buses?
Oh, van and trailer.
Van and trailer.
Dude.
That's
not even a 15-passenger, like a Chevy Astro van.
That's some character building stuff.
I have joked so much that every band that tours, it should be a requirement that they do a year in a van and trailer, just so you can you appreciate it so much more. And it's like, and being in a van and trailer, honestly, I've had some of the funnest times touring a van with these guys around the country. I really have. And there were just so many great moments and funny moments. But I remember the first time I got onto a bus when I toured with Red after being in that van for so long, I was like, this is amazing. And I've seen the opposite happen to bands that I've toured with. I'm not going to name who it is, but there is a band that we toured with when I was in INEPT that when they first started their career in the early 2000s, their first single they ever released was huge. And when they first started touring, they never toured in a van and trailer. They went straight to multiple buses and semis.
Wow.
And then 10 years later, when we toured with them, they're on the decline. And they had to move down to a van and trailer. And they could not handle it. Yeah. I mean, you could see it. They were miserable.
Yeah.
And that was one of the moments where I was like, I'm so thankful that I, really roughed it out for a few years. I mean, dude, we never got hotels. We slept in the van every night. And when we did get a hotel, we'd get one room and all 5 of us would kind of just crash wherever.
Wherever.
Yeah.
Share one bathroom and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable. So before we move out of too far away from the Illinois area, what were some of the venues that you went to see shows at? Who and what kind of concerts did you go see? Who ever got you thinking about?
So when I was younger, growing up in a small town, we didn't have venues. We had bars that had stages. And every now and then we would get a semi-national act come in and play at one of the places that were just making a stop between Chicago and Des Moines or something. But for the most part, it was a lot of local bands. And one of my best friends growing up, when we were in 8th grade, joined a band with a bunch of guys that were juniors and seniors in high school because he was so good at guitar when we were that young that he was in this band. And I would honestly say watching him perform, it was we'd go to these local shows in our hometown and there'd be hundreds of kids from our high school watching my friend's band and seeing him rock on stage. And it was really watching him and his band where I was like, dude, I could do this. And then when we started getting older, we started heading towards Chicago because for us with no traffic, it was about a 45-minute drive into the city. But there were some smaller venues in the suburbs like Aurora, stuff like that, that are all closed down now. But when we started going into the city, we started going to Metro, one of the most legendary venues in Chicago. We'd go to shows at House of Blues a lot, Congress Theater, and then smaller venues like Bottom Lounge, Beat Kitchen, stuff like that. And there were a handful of local bands in our area that made it, that I really, I knew them very well, and I was just like, this is so cool. Yeah. It's you want to be that hometown hero where it's our band made it, and you come home and you're huge. It's we grew up watching Lucky Boys Confusion play small places in Naperville and Aurora, and then they got signed, and then they toured, and it was just the coolest thing ever. So I would say around that age of probably 14, 15, when I started seeing all these local bands from our area get signed. Yeah. And then if you want to go a little past local, it's I saw Rise Against cutting their teeth, Chevelle, all these bands from Chicago, man.
Before they blew up.
Yeah. It was crazy. And then there were other bands that that are now popular that came from other bands in our area. So Medina Lake was a combined effort of 2 local bands in Chicago that was the Blank Theory and Reforma. They just joined forces and then made a new band and got signed. It was just so cool to see some of the members from the local bands joining other bands. The bass player for Chevelle used to be in another local band that we used to play with all the time, and then joined their band. And it's cool to see that, man. And I think my first taste of being, like, the first time I played a show when I was 17, like, to a crowd, I was just like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And as I got older, like we've talked, like they're that realistic sense sets in, where it's like, I tell so many people that ask me my opinion and my advice, like, what should I do if my band wants to make it? And I was like, well, you need to be realistic, because even if your band is really good, there's a huge amount of chance that goes into it. Yeah. It is statistically, it is really hard to get signed and make it.
Okay, so I cut you off when you worked for Red, the band Red. You took on several roles there over the course of the time that you worked for them.
Yeah,
a lot of different positions.
Yeah. So I started with them, like, it was literally just to do merchandise and lighting.
Yeah.
So it was a fun little thing. Like, I never had a rehearsal or anything with those guys. It was...
You just jump in.
Like, the first show I ever did with them was the first time I ever saw any of their merch. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Like, I figured out how to set up a display and figured out a system for counting shirts and stuff like that. And then... so I'd sell all night, and then when they'd go on stage, I'd run to the front of house, jump on the lighting console, run their show, and the second they were done, I'd run back to merch and just sell again. And then as time went on, I started developing other things with them. I started teching for their bass player, and then at the time our crew was just a tour manager, a guitar tech, and myself. Okay. And that guitar tech... now guitar techs for Florida Georgia Line.
Oh, okay.
Like, that's how small this industry is. Sure. All the guys in country now are guys that I toured with years ago.
Yeah.
So I started bass teching, then I started drum teching, and then we did a Winter Jam tour where they wanted to bring out flame units and pyro, but they didn't want to have an extra person on the road, so they paid for my certification to go get trained in flames.
Yeah.
So on Winter Jam, I switched from lighting because I had the way Winter Jam's format is, I think they had like a 15-minute set.
Yeah.
So it's like 4 songs. So they had another band's LD do their lighting show, and I did merchandise and pyro. So, and that was still to this day, that's the only time I've ever done pyro. Yeah. That was not honestly something I didn't want to continue.
Yeah.
It was fun, but like...
It's good to know. It's good to know what's going on in those departments, though.
Yeah.
And you did merchandise, which is a great place for people to start going on the road, things like that. You can watch other people doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Figure out what other positions you might want to go after.
And the merchandise thing is funny because when I worked for Red, I thought I was a really good merch guy. And it wasn't until I started working for a merch company and got put on bigger tours that I realized, like... Dude, like, almost nothing I was doing with them merchandise-wise was correct. I literally didn't know what I was doing. I made sure all the money was good and stuff like that, but in terms of, like, paperwork and counts and stuff like that, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So
is that how you transitioned away from Red? And you started, I know that you worked for a lot of other, like you did a Van Halen tour and a couple other tours like that where you did merchandise with this particular company? Yeah,
so after Red... I did another Winter Jam tour where I did merchandise for Warner's Christian label, Word. Mm-hmm. I did merchandise for all their artists. I know it was for King and Country. It was like Group 1 crew and Dara McLean. That's actually how I met Chris, who's the guitar player for Dustin. He was the guitar player for all of those bands on that tour.
Oh, okay.
So we met back then.
Awesome.
So I did that tour for some filler to, like, just keep working. And then... I got a phone call from a friend of mine who I had met on a tour that was like, hey, I work for this merch company now, and you know, I noticed you have a decent work ethic. Would you be interested coming out as an assistant on a merch tour for this company with me? It's like, it's a great company. They handle tons of big bands. They'll place you on tours, and it's good pay. And I was like, well, yeah. And the funny thing was, I didn't even ask him on the phone what band it was. I was so excited that that was my first, like, they're like, we're going to pay you weekly rather than a show rate. And so, like, a couple days later when I was finally talking to this company, and it's super professional, like, they booked our plane tickets for us to get out on tour, like, you know, all that stuff. it ended up being Nickelback.
Okay.
So I went out as the merch assistant, going from Christian touring to Nickelback. And it was like, I think the lineup was like Nickelback, Bush, Seether, and Theory of a Dead Man. And it was like totally different world.
Yeah.
And that's where I really learned, like, okay, at least merchandise-wise, everything I knew was wrong. And that's where I learned. So I filled in on that tour for a little bit. And then the merchandise company, and by this time, and by the way, I had decided to move to Nashville. I was like, if I'm going to keep working in this industry, I'm going to move to Nashville. So this was about 2011. I was on tour, and the merchandise company called me, and they're like, so now that this is going to be ending, do you want to go home, or do you want to just go right to another tour?
Yeah.
I was like, throw me on another tour.
Yeah.
And they're like, cool, we're going to send you on Van Halen. I was like,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So I flew straight from that Nickelback tour to the Van Halen tour. I think I did four months with Van Halen. And then the second that tour was done, you want to go home or you want to go on another tour? I was like, another tour. So they sent me out on Journey.
Okay.
And Pat Benatar was the opener for Journey on that tour. So I was doing merch for Journey and also double dipping and helping Pat. And then after that tour ended, I guess, I don't know who specifically asked, might have been Pat. Knowing her like I do now, I'm pretty confident in saying it probably was, but her manager called my office and they basically said, like, we want him full time to come out on tour. So I spent 3 years doing merchandise for Pat Benatar and her husband. And that also kind of turned into kind of being a production assistant.
Yeah.
I was setting up her husband's dressing room every day with his recording rig and stuff like that. I was kind of doing a lot of other stuff. I learned a lot from guys like that. You might know, do you know Chris Nathan?
I know the name.
He's currently Jake Owen's PM, but
okay.
He was my PM on Pat Benatar.
Yeah.
So, like, it's so funny how everybody that I've met on tour has met in the country world.
Yeah.
Like, we've all met up right here.
Yeah.
So, and then I finally got to a point where I just, like, I liked doing merch, but there was kind of a sense of ego with it. It's like, I want to be like the guys on stage.
Yeah.
So one of the, when Pat Benatar had some time off, the merch company I worked for sent me out with Walk Off the Earth, Canadian band. And I kind of just went for it one day. I went right up to their drummer because he didn't have a tech.
Yeah.
And I was like, can I tech your stuff? And he was like, do you know drums? I was like, enough.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I started doing merch to drum teching his stuff every single day. And I learned a lot from him.
Yeah. And
it was just, again, one of those moments where it's like, I'm going to absorb this knowledge and use it later on. And that went into drum teching for multiple other bands. You know, we don't have to go down my whole history, but it's like one of the last tours I did before Dustin, I did my first world tour, like around the globe with Lifehouse. I was their bass and drum tech. And then the funniest part about working for Dustin, and I've always told people in this industry, there is a sense of fake it till you make it. Like, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, at least act like you do. So I got the call from Dustin's production manager in, like, I think it was late 2015. And he was like, hey, I got your phone number from so-and-so. We're looking for a new guitar tech. Would you be interested? And I was like, you know, the country thing had always appealed to me because of the schedule.
Sure.
And especially by that time, I was already married. And we had dogs and stuff like that. And I was like, man, working 3 days a week and being home, that'd be great. But I told this production manager, I was like, I'm not going to lie, man. Like, I've never been a guitar tech. He's like, yeah, but you've been a bass tech for like 6 different people. I was like, yeah. And he goes, same thing, dude. You'll be fine. So he was like, come out on this tour. We're finishing a headlining tour. If you don't like it, fine. If you like it, we'll talk about it. And I think it was by the end of the third week I had teched for Dustin. And I wasn't just teching for Dustin. I was teching for everyone. Yeah. Like Mitchell, Chris, Colin, Dustin. Yeah. I think by the end of the third week, Dustin was like, yeah, I want you to stay full time.
Very cool.
And you know, it's interesting because we live in a town where there are just knowledgeable people with everything. And there were times when I first started with Dustin where it was that I don't know exactly what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to make it look like I do, because that'll make the artist comfortable. Yeah. And there was a lot of learning curves and stuff like that. But now I'm very confident in what I do.
Sure.
And, I said to a friend the other day, I may not be the most knowledgeable guitar tech in this town. Like, I watch some of the guys, like when we were out with Paisley, I would watch his tech, like, rip open amps every day and just start wiring stuff. And I'm just like, I do not know how to do any of that.
Yeah.
But the thing I've always prided myself in is my work ethic and how I can work under pressure. Like, if the job needs to get done, I'll get it done.
Yeah.
So.
And you'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Presented with the situation.
Oh yeah, YouTube's been great for learning stuff. Like, dude, there have been times where gear's broken on the road, and I was like, I don't know how to fix this. I'm gonna check YouTube, and I've literally fixed gear on the road just by watching somebody else do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now you're here in Nashville. You've been in Nashville how long?
I moved here in 2010, so about 10 years.
Before or after the flood? Because 2010 was a big flood in May.
I was kind of living here at the time. I was
going back and forth.
I was staying at somebody's house, but I was still kind of going back and forth. But actually, we were on tour when that happened.
Okay.
But we did a show. I was still working for Red at the time. We did a show at the Opry for the Dove Awards 2 nights before that happened.
Oh, wow.
So I remember when people were sending pictures of how the Opry looked, I was like, we were just in there.
Going back a little bit again, you were an athlete, and you were in football, and you were in baseball. So where does hockey come in? Because you're a big hockey fan.
So I've just always loved, my dad loved hockey, and I got into it. We went to a lot of Blackhawks games when I was a kid.
Yeah.
The thing about hockey in the Chicago area is that through the 90s and the early 2000s, the Blackhawks were terrible. So nobody really cared, and there weren't a lot of hockey programs in our area. We had one kid in our high school that played hockey, but he had to drive like an hour away to join a junior league to play. So it kind of became a convenience thing. Like, I can play sports at school. Yeah. I don't need to go an hour away. But I grew up on a lake, and the second that lake would freeze over, we'd get some friends together, grab our skates. We'd go, dude, even if we didn't have skates, we would just go out there and just mess around. And then my love of hockey really just came from my dad and growing up and watching Blackhawks games. And then, of course, in the late 2000s when the Blackhawks finally started getting a good team again, like, the whole city got back into it. So now in Chicago, there are youth programs everywhere. Yeah. And it's kind of what you're starting to see here with the Preds starting, a few years ago when they make their championship run. Yeah. I have so many friends that I've toured with that their kids all play junior hockey, and I'm like, that's so cool that they have those programs around here, because when I was growing up, we didn't.
So as a touring tech, one of the cool advantages is when you're playing with an act that gets to play arenas, you get to take a peek sometimes at these hockey locker rooms, which I have done that, which I'm not a big hockey guy, but I have several friends that are huge hockey fans. Yeah. And sometimes when I get to go into these hockey locker rooms, I'll take some pictures just to send them, because I feel guilty, because it's a big deal, even if they're rival teams or whatever. Seeing those locker rooms is a pretty cool thing in the arenas.
Actually, one of my favorite moments of touring, no joke, was 2 summers ago. We did a show at the United Center in Chicago. It's the first time I ever worked a show there after going there my whole life. And my guitar tech workbox is covered in Chicago sports memorabilia and hockey sticks and stuff. And one of the people that works at the United Center saw it, was like, "Are you from here originally?" I was like, "Yeah, I grew up big hockey fan." And she's like, "You want to see the locker room?" And I was like, Yeah, so she gave me a tour of the Blackhawks locker room and gave me a puck from the freezer and stuff. It was so cool, man.
Well, and one of the most decorated ceilings with banners between the Bulls and the Blackhawks.
Oh, yeah. It's great, man. And then I also every arena we do, I try and collect, if it's a hockey arena, I get a jersey from that arena. So I think I'm missing like 4 or 5 NHL jerseys in total. From the teams that I've collected.
That's a cool collection.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how you've pivoted here and made great use of your time at home and trying to figure things out. So you have a YouTube channel, and by the time this interview gets released, you'll probably be over 50,000 followers. You're right about to hit 50,000 now. And this is something that you started during the pandemic, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of exciting, man. Like, I would have never guessed this would have happened, but the quick backstory was that while we were home, and we had nothing to do, I play a lot of video games. I like to play hockey and a lot of shooters and stuff like that. A buddy of mine was like, you should stream on Twitch. So I tried to do it, and I learned really fast that it's very hard to get a following streaming. It's incredibly difficult. Yeah. So the same friend was like, why don't you try doing stuff on YouTube? And I was like, what am I going to do? And he's like, reaction videos are popular right now. And I started thinking about it for a couple days, and I was like, that could be really cool. One, I could check out music that I'm not familiar with. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I can take my knowledge from touring and working on gear and somehow apply that to it. So one of the popular things on YouTube now is reaction videos, where people watch music videos and they just kind of literally react to it.
Well, you're reviewing. I mean, your thing is...
Yeah. And they're entertaining, but every time I've watched a reaction video, I've been like, there's nothing really of value. You're just watching somebody react. So what I'm going to do is react to the music I've never heard, but talk about this live performance. Yeah. How are they doing that? How are they sounding like that? What kind of work goes into that? So I started doing that in July. July 12th was my first video I ever uploaded, and I didn't expect much. Like, I remember a couple weeks later, we were doing something with Dustin. I think it was an iHeart thing or something. And I had my laptop open, and we were watching like the live subscriber count on my YouTube page. And I remember hitting 1,000 subscribers. And it was like 2 weeks after I started my page, and everybody was like, oh, that's so awesome. Yeah. 10 days later, I was already at 10,000.
Man.
Like, it was insane. And once I started learning about monetization and ad revenue and stuff like that on YouTube, it kind of hit me about a month later. I was like, I might be able to pay our bills this way. So I really, while we've been home, I've really put 100% of my energy. My wife would probably tell you 150%, because it's a lot more work than I ever realized, man.
I've learned a lot doing this.
Dude.
Video editing and video itself is another animal that I hadn't gotten much into, but it is a lot of work.
This is the easy part.
Like, this is easy
when I film my reactions and do my gear breakdowns, that's the easiest part.
Absolutely.
Then I sit for another 4 hours on average just editing. Yeah. And there are some days where just mentally I just don't want to do it, but I have to force myself to do it, because at this point I'm trying to put new content out 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Yeah. But it's become such an interesting adventure, man. Like, I've met some really awesome people, some other YouTubers, but people from around the world. Like, the community that is on some of these YouTube pages is unbelievable. A lot of the music I've been checking out is stuff based in Europe, like stuff I've never heard of. Yeah. A lot of the Nordic countries have a big metal fan base, and a lot of the people that I've been talking to are from over there. And I actually, a couple days ago, I started learning Finnish.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, I was like, I want to learn another language, and I'm going to learn Finnish. And everybody I've talked to is like, why would you pick that? Because it's a difficult language, but it's been fun. And so far I'm through, like, the basics. Like, I could introduce myself or ask who somebody is or thank somebody or say cheers or whatever. But it's just, it's been so fun, man.
But you have viewers from over there.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing, so you can address them directly. It's very, very cool.
The funniest thing is, in the YouTube analytics, it tells you what countries watch your page the most, and right now it's like 20% of my viewers are from the US, and then like 15% are from Germany, 14% are from Finland. It's crazy. It's like all these European countries make up the majority of my watchers on YouTube. You
have several platforms that you participate in, and you do a lot of gaming, and Twitch is not something that I have much experience with at all. So so you go on there, and then you are playing against others in gaming,
or by myself. So you can do anything on Twitch, but the biggest thing it's used for is gaming. Okay. So basically what a Twitch setup is I can capture a window of a game I'm playing on my screen and put it on my stream, and then have like a little picture-in-picture box of me from my camera on there, and I literally just game with friends and then talk to people that are in the chat on the live stream
while you're doing that.
Yeah, and then once a week I just do a sit and chat with people connected to my YouTube. So a lot of the people from the YouTube come over, and I'll literally just sit and answer questions or just talk, or we talk about whatever. I've watched like YouTube videos of like the top hockey fights of all time on there, and we've had a good time. But there are musicians in this pandemic that have turned to Twitch, where they'll get on there and they'll just plug in their guitar and they'll like write music while people watch them.
Wow.
A lot of bands are doing that now.
Very cool. All right, well, let's talk about your animals. I brought mine.
Yeah.
Tell me about your animals at home.
So we have 2 dogs at home. We have Mowgli, who is a about to be 7-year-old Black Lab German Shepherd mix.
Nice.
Claire and I fostered him, I think about 2013 or 14. We started fostering him. I was on tour. Claire was fostering him. And it was a foster fail. I came home and she picked me up and he was in the back of her car and she's like, we're keeping him. And I'm like, foster great. Fail. And he's just awesome. Like, I love it. And I didn't grow up with dogs. I grew up with cats. So these are the first dogs I've ever had, and they're great. And our other dog that we have, also a foster failure. Yeah. She is a poodle, chihuahua, and something else mix. And she's the funniest looking little dog. She reminds me of Gizmo from Gremlins, like when he's like little furball. But she's great. Her name's Penny. She's about 6 years old. And it's so funny because Mowgli weighs about 80 pounds and she weighs about 12 pounds. And the stereotypes when people see us walking the dogs, they're like, oh, he's like your dog, right? I was like, no, the big one is hers. The little tiny fluff ball, that's my dog. I love him, man. Yeah. I absolutely. There's nothing. And, we've had them we've had Mowgli for about 6 years. We've had Penny for about 5. There was no better feeling than when I came home from tour than just that warm welcome at home from my wife and my dogs. And dude, it's just dogs. Seriously, I'm a huge proponent. Oh, yeah. Like, dogs make everything better.
Absolutely.
They're fantastic. He is just...
He's chill.
He's way chill.
He's not impressed with our conversation, apparently.
I guess not. But, yeah, they're great, man. I love them.
Absolutely. Okay, so a couple other things. We were talking about hockey. Violent Gentlemen. Mm-hmm. You probably need to shout out to those guys because I know they support you in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
They made you some crew shirts and things like that.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of them until I saw you on tour with those shirts, and they do a lot of. I've seen a lot of their stuff since then.
They do a ton, man. So Violent Gentlemen is a company based out of Southern California, the Los Angeles area. It originally started by 2 guys that were bootlegging T-shirts in the Anaheim Ducks parking lot, if I'm not mistaken on that story. And one of the Anaheim players, George Peros, saw them and liked them and literally funded and bought into their company. And since then, they've turned into a giant brand. They make hockey-based apparel. Now they've gone on from doing just, apparel for themselves that they release to they have exclusive deals with NHL teams now that they print merchandise for. They do a lot of stuff for a lot of other bands as well. And they're really involved with community stuff. Chain Reaction, the venue in Anaheim, is very close to them. It's a venue that they, grew up going to. It's in danger of shutting down because of this pandemic. And they've been throwing this huge fundraiser for them where they made Chain Reaction Violent Gentlemen t-shirts. They're throwing these I wouldn't call them parties, but they're having these big parking lot hangout things where people show up and they can buy t-shirts and donate to help save the club. But they've also done a lot of stuff for a lot of different charities too. But they're just great guys. The whole organization, another guy that works there that I talk to regularly, Mike, he's kind of third in charge, I would say. He runs a lot of their stuff. He's my direct contact with them, and it's they're actually working right now on printing a Violent Gentleman Tank the Tech collaboration t-shirt for YouTube. And
super. Dude,
they printed the Dustin Lynch crew shirts for us.
Those.
They're
very cool.
They're genius marketing modeling to me. They never spend money on advertising. They just give their stuff away to people. They told me in the past they've literally just sent boxes of their merchandise to hockey arenas addressed to the team and just let people take whatever they want. They didn't even ask for it. So now you watch interviews with hockey players after the game. They're all wearing Violent Gentleman hats and shirts, and like just great guys, man. They've always been kind to me, so I've always supported them, and I wear their stuff in a lot of my videos.
Very cool. I wanted to make sure I mentioned them because I've seen a lot of their stuff since you were the first one that I saw some of their gear with.
Yeah,
a few years ago. All right, Illinois, big food town, big food cities, big food state. Tell me about what you got to have when you're on the road, when you go back home. What do you got to have?
So for me, deep dish pizza is one of my favorite things.
Okay.
There's lots of arguments that people have. If we're talking chains, I'm going Lou Malnati's over Giordano's. That's me.
Okay.
But there are some local spots, Paisano, Pie Quad, stuff downtown. But my mom actually sends me frozen Lou Malnati's pizzas in the mail every now and then. Portillo's, another must when I go home.
Okay.
Italian beef, hot dogs. Yeah. There's a couple local joints around where I grew up. The town I grew up in, Sandwich, they have a little place called Johnny K's that they do hot dogs and Italian beef that are just unreal. But yeah, it's been so long since I've been home now.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff that used to only be up there is all over the place now too. So, I mean, they just opened, I think they opened a Gino's East in Nashville.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah, I mean, I never loved Gino's East pizza, but a lot of people do. So, but yeah, when I go home, it's food. It's beef. It's a lot of meat, a lot of cheese. Yeah. And then my mom loves cooking and makes, which is funny to me because our background in our family is very Irish. She makes a lot of Italian food. So, and from scratch. Like, my mom visited Claire and I for Christmas or Thanksgiving a few years ago and made so much food. Like, made, like, chicken Alfredo, made the Alfredo sauce from scratch. Like, just, and it's just great, man. So, home cooking, Portillo's, Lou Malnati's. That's probably my go-tos.
Very cool. Yeah. Is there anybody else that we need to give shout-outs to?
My wife for putting up with me.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal when you do what you do and have a relationship like that.
Dude, I try and give her as much credit as I can because people don't realize how much our spouses and significant others probably go through with us being gone all the time. I mean, when Claire and I got married, I got home 3 days before our wedding and left on another tour like 3 days after. And she's been with me since I was on the rock tours where I was gone for 4 or 5 months at a time. And now that we've transitioned to country, it's great. And I know this situation is terrible for a lot of people, but this pandemic for me, this is the most time I've spent with my wife since we've known each other consecutively.
Well, it'll test the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has proven that this whole time period. A lot of things have happened, good and bad, with relationships.
It's been 9 months at home, and we haven't had any issues, so I think we've passed.
All right. You have a huge online presence, so tell everybody how they find you, how they get a hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. YouTube, which is the biggest thing I'm working on. The link to that is just youtube.com/tankthetech. I've got new uploads on there all the time. I think at this point in the last 5 months, I've already got like 150 videos up there. So there's a lot of content to watch.
I want to interrupt you because not only do you do the reaction videos where you review stuff, but you also started doing interviews with Roadies.
Oh, yeah.
And you do some Q&As and things like that.
Yeah.
It's really good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. The interviews have been fun because it's like this. It's I've learned that it's really cool for the bands and other touring people that I've talked to sit with another person in the industry and talk rather than have an interview with just a random media person. And that's why this feels so comfortable. It's the same thing. And then Twitch, I don't stream as much as I am on YouTube. Like I stream like 3-4 days a week. But same thing. It's twitch.tv/tankthetech. Instagram, Twitter, both @tankthetech. Facebook, I don't do.
Okay. Well, he is, you can find him at Tank the Tech online. Tank, thanks so much for doing this. It's been a blast.
Dude, thank you so much, man. This was awesome. Hopefully I didn't talk your ear off too much.
No, man. It's been, we could have driven around some more, actually.
Oh, I know. I don't even know how long it's been, and I feel it's been like 2 hours.
It's all good, man.
An hour and a half.
It's all good.
Well, thank you very much, man. This was
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. Let us know what you thought by leaving us a comment. You can also follow us on these social networks. And if you want to see more, please like, share, and subscribe.